Welcome to this tutorial on aggregate resources. We are going to briefly discuss the requirements for addressing aggregate resources in your comprehensive plan. Economically viable deposits of aggregate resources suitable for use in road and concrete construction are an essential component of a vibrant economy and a competitive building industry. Locally available construction aggregates typically consist of sand and gravel, or crushed carbonate rock known as dolostone. The cost for provision of aggregate resources quickly multiplies as the distance to the resource increases. To keep costs down, it is imperative that we strive to use resources within the metropolitan area prior to urbanization. Choosing not to extract aggregate prior to urbanization renders the resource practically unrecoverable in the future, both economically and aesthetically, and only leads to increases in road and building construction costs. To that end, the Minnesota legislature incorporated into Minnesota statutes guidance for local governments with aggregate resources to include information in their comprehensive plan to encourage recovery of these resources prior to urbanization. The Metropolitan Council and the Minnesota Geological Survey jointly prepared a report utilizing 1997 geologic data to map the precise locations of remaining viable aggregate resources within the metropolitan area. That report, referred to as Circular 46, was published in 2000. The Metropolitan Council has incorporated the aggregate resources dataset from Circular 46 into its GIS database for access and use by local governmental units in preparation of their plans. This map shows the location of aggregate resources in the region. Access to the aggregate resource overlay dataset can be obtained from the Minnesota Geospatial Commons under Metropolitan Council resources. The Local Planning Handbook's Land Use Plan element identifies the plan content requirements for those communities with viable deposits of aggregate resources within their borders. If over 80 acres of aggregate resources have been identified by Circular 46 as present within the boundaries of a community, the land use plan element must show where aggregate resources have been identified, include language to address and minimize potential land use conflicts, and identify measures to ensure that aggregate resources are extracted prior to urbanization. The use of Circular 46 data on your land use map allows for the easy observation of areas that are underlain by aggregate resources, just as shown in this example from Rosemount's 2030 Comprehensive Plan. Importantly, the plan does not require those resources to be mined. Additionally, the Council does not encourage the mining of aggregate resources that exist below lands that might be subject to environmental protection overlays. In many locations within the Twin Cities region, viable aggregate resource deposits are overlain by undeveloped land supporting remnants of native vegetation. From 2001 to 2003, the Metropolitan Council collaborated with the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources to create a GIS database of identified remnant native terrestrial woodlands, old fields, prairies, and wetlands in the region that were of good to very good ecological condition. This data set is presented in the Council's GIS database as Regionally Significant Ecological Areas and can be accessed from the Minnesota Geospatial Commons. The Council's regional park system is dominated by large regionally significant ecological areas where these resources can be protected and enjoyed for their ecological and recreational values. To help conserve the region's few remaining diverse natural habitat areas, we encourage communities to include local-scale natural resource inventories in their local plans. By creating a balance between natural resource protection and development pressure, communities are urged to adopt local land uses and planning strategies to protect remaining natural resource areas and minimize development impacts on the few regionally significant ecological areas that remain. Where these areas or other locally protected natural resource areas overlay aggregate deposits, the Council prioritizes high-quality native habitat preservation over aggregate extraction. Thank you for watching this tutorial. For more online tutorials and other resources, please check the PlanIt page of the Local Planning Handbook.